The second thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the question of racism, because I think there are things about this, like the militarization and national security state nature of U.S. society, that have echoes here or vice versa. I don't know enough about here to characterize here, but I'm thinking that this might be something that we have in common. You know, for us and for the part of the student movement, SDS, that I was an organizer for and a leader of for many years, and then the Weather Underground, the issue of empire and of racism were completely critical and intertwined. And we see the world, I still see the world, Bill and I just wrote a book called Race Course Against White Supremacy, as we see the United States as being characterized by white supremacy, racism, and really the legacy of slavery being very much alive. And so you can see it not only in the levels of poverty, which are catastrophic in the African American and Latino communities in the United States, the prison population. We have the world's largest prison population, 2.4 million now, and counting, and we have an overwhelming majority, disproportionate majority of the people in prison locked up are African American and Latino. That is powerful and unbelievable, really. In Chicago 3 years ago, 1 million immigrants, most of them illegal immigrants, marched on May Day from the west side of Chicago all the way downtown to the lake. It's one of all the demonstrations I've been in, it was one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of children, grandparents, old people, because it was a standing up of a part of American society that's often invisible. And it's very visible if you're looking for it, because they're doing the work that nobody else is doing in the United States, and everybody depends on it. But it's invisible in that kind of stand-up, film us, here I am, in your face kind of way. Very important transformation. And yet, of course, because of the economic crisis and because of the rise of a really harsh ultra-right wing in the United States, immigrants, of course, are a major target right now. And so we have the wall, we're building a wall with the company, the main company that's building your wall, I don't want to call it your wall, the wall here. I understand it's the same company that is also the major contractor, this Israeli company, building the wall between India and Pakistan. So, you know, there's so many, we need artists, I think, to actually do this justice and to explain what's happening. And the other thing I just want to say about racism and white skin privilege is that the other place in which it's a major flashpoint in the United States, of course, is with Arabs and Muslims in the United States and Arab Americans. So the response to 9/11 was to, of course, incarcerate thousands of Muslims and Arabs who were on various kinds of visas in the United States. And then, of course, every one of them was released or deported. There was no criminal activity found among any single one of them. And then to have an extraordinary call-in where people had to come in to the Homeland Security. Then we got something called Homeland Security, which we never had before, and register. And so the characterization, the racist stereotyping of Muslims and of Arabs is through the roof, and is very, if you understand racism, again, you know, core slavery racism in the United States, you can recognize something like this when it comes. It's potent, it's tenacious, and I think it's essential in any organizing work that we try to counter it. So I'll just mention the other things that we're working on, issues of women's rights, gender, LGBT issues, living wage, meaningful work. There's been lots of organizing going on at factory levels, but also at places where people are out of work and deprived of work and doing temporary work and day work. Environmental justice, what Grace Lee Boggs in Detroit calls living differently so that others may live. I think a very important slogan for people who live in the first world or in a first world country. But Stormy, who's here with you and has been working here, can tell you a lot about environmental justice because she's an activist and has helped shape a very important environmental justice struggle in California with Native American people. But that's a very powerful issue across the United States. Healthcare, education, and civil and legal rights. So I'm only mentioning these things to tell you that I think even though we don't have a peace movement that is worth anything right now in the United States, we have public opinion that's against these wars, but we have not been able to mobilize it as a peace movement. And I think those issues of how to take political organizing and political activism and direct action and interventions and turn it into a movement is the issue I'm hoping you're going to answer for us, that everybody is looking for. I think yeah, that's what I'm here for, but I still don't know. I've been lucky enough to see several major movements in my lifetime, but I want another one. So, and I want to be part of another one. And I don't know when they happen. And the extraordinary thing is, you know, when it happens, when it takes off as a movement, and it's bigger than everybody you know, and there's lots of people you don't know, and things are happening faster than you can keep track of, it's an extraordinary thing, and it creates its own dilemmas that then you have to solve. But until it happens, there's no choice but to try to do the work of education and activism and exposure. And I think it's essential for us to try to figure out, with everything we do, are we educating? Are we opening minds? Are we challenging people? Because, and we can come back to this, there's a way of acting where you have to act ethically and morally. You just have to, because the situation you find yourself in is unacceptable, and to not act is a form of action. And of course, the weather people found themselves in that particular corner. And at the same time, I think you have to be imagining that even when you think you can't, that you're organizing others, because how did you get there after all? And somebody organized you, and somebody helped enlighten you about the connections between issues. And so the great Miles Horton, I don't know if any of you know him, but he was a longtime socialist activist in the United States. He lived in the South. They burned down his home several times. He ran Highlander Center, and you can look him up. There's a great memoir of him. But he used to say, in a movement, there's valley time and there's mountain time. And if you're lucky enough in your life, you get to have 1 or 2 mountain times. But in the meantime, you're doing the valley time work, and you have to, afterwards, when you're in the mountain time moment, you can look back and say, oh my God, all this work went into this. Of course, that's how we got here. But you can't see it going up the mountain. You can't see it coming, and you don't know when it's going to come. I know that sounds a little mystical. I'm not mystical, but I think it's actually historic that you don't know when things are going to come together. It's the coming together that radicalizes people. When the Black Freedom Movement and the anti-war Vietnam War movement came together, the connections radicalized everybody. You couldn't see these as single-issue things that Congress could take care of. It became systemic. You saw that you had to change the system. And that's partly why part of our strategy with ARC is to connect the issues. Whatever you're doing, whatever daily organizing work you're doing, you have to connect it with another issue, because it is in those connections that you see what we're up against. Thanks.